Hi, this is Jeff Belanger, and when I'm not out legend tripping or looking for ghosts, I'm listening to Unknown Origins Radio.
We live in a world filled with the unknown. Ghosts and spirits wander through our physical dimension. Undiscovered creatures lurk in the shadows, and strange lights and craft seem to dominate our skies. Modern science refuses to acknowledge their existence, yet credible eyewitnesses are convinced these things are real, and it's up to independent researchers to search for the truth. Welcome to Unknown Origins Radio.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Unknown Origins Radio, where once again, yes, we talk about everything having to do with this strange and paranormal. And tonight, as usual, I'm joined by our co-hosts. Well, first of all, I'm Mark Johnson. I guess that would help if I announce who the hell I am. You know, people tuning in. Who's that guy? I'm your host, Mark Johnson. Joining us are our co-hosts, Karrie-Ann Versace. Hey, Karrie-Ann.
Hey, Mark.
And Loren DePinto. How you doing, Loren?
I'm doing pretty good, Mark.
So how are the two kitties doing? Loren, you picked up a couple of new cats?
Yes, I adopted two kitties this week, an adult cat and a kitten, and they're wonderful. What a wonderful addition to our family. Beautiful. I'm having such a good time.
Yes,
you have to come.
My wife's jealous now. She's talking, we need to go get another one. It's like, oh, God.
Uh-oh. I'm going to be causing a lot of problems, aren't I, on Facebook? Sorry. Sorry in advance.
Too many cute pictures on Facebook. I'm sorry.
Aw,
they must be deleted. Anyway, we've got a wonderful show for everybody tonight. We got a fantastic guest. I'm really excited to announce him. But before we do, once again, we're going to be spending the next few shows leading up to into March to talk about, of course, you guessed it, Phenomenology 104. Woo-hoo! And what's it called this year? They're calling it Parapalooza.
Yeah, Parapalooza.
So tickets are now on sale. They've announced their full guest list. They've got everybody in the paranormal that's been invited to this event. So be sure to go to phenomevents.com. You can buy your tickets. It's March 22nd through the 25th. We are going to be there. Unknown Origins Radio will be there this year. Of course, it's my first year, but you two have, you had your debauched fun last year.
That's a good way to put it. That's fun.
Yeah, and I did want to say they added Chris Williams from Ghost Hunters International recently, so that's a big bonus for them this year.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of great guests. A lot of friends of our show here. Patrick and Burns and Marley Gibson are going to be on. John Zaffis is going to be on. Oh, my God. Who else? Chip Coffey is going to be there. Who else? Help me here. There's so many I can't remember.
Chris Fleming, Aaron Stakers.
Ben Hansen from Sci-Fi's Factor Faked.
Yeah.
So we're Jeff Ballinger, sure.
Yep. So we're going to have a wonderful time. So be sure to get your tickets, come on down, see us all in person. We're going to have a blast, I guarantee it.
Oh, God. And scared.
Oh, yeah, and scared. Yeah, you kind of forgot about them, don't you?
Oh, my God, you can't forget about them.
How can I forget about my scared?
Well, anyway, getting into tonight's show, we have a great guest. We're really excited that he was able to come on. And I'm going to get right into introducing Mr. Cliff Barrackman from the Animal Planet hit show, Finding Bigfoot. How are you doing tonight, Cliff?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, well, thank you very much for coming on. We're really excited to have you here. And I have to admit, I'm an unabashed fan of the show. You last season you guys came in and it just did 6 episodes, and now for this season they've picked you up for how many episodes this season?
Well, let's see. Technically, I guess it's 11 if you count the California Bluff Creek 2-hour special as one episode. So we did that one, which aired on Halloween or the day before, I believe, and then we did 10 others, which will be airing all throughout the beginning of the year here for season 2.
If there's one thing I want to complain about that you need to take back to the Animal Planet execs is, have them show when an episode airs, repeat it on Animal Planet. I missed that Bluff Creek episode. I heard how fantastic it was, and the experiences that especially Renee had, Miss Skeptic, who kind of had her eyes widen. A couple of things happened to her out there, and I missed it, and every time it's supposed to come on, I set my DVR and something happens and it doesn't tape. So to date, I have not yet seen it, and I'm so upset.
Well, that's the curse of Bigfoot. Whenever there's like 10 Bigfoot around together, something's wrong.
Like the Jinn.
The Jinn or the Men in Black who've been tormenting us lately. Now, Cliff, on being a radio show, I do have to ask the typical boring radio show questions, but, for a lot of our listeners who don't know much about your background, I was wondering if you could tell us, how did you get into investigating Bigfoot and Sasquatch?
Well, I'll say that I was always interested in the subject. Since I was a little boy, I remember talking about Bigfoots when I was like 5 years old or something like that. And I've always kind of retained that quirky, eccentric sort of interest in everything monsters, as I was growing up. But it wasn't until I was in college, a few-hour break in between classes, and I would wander around through the library, kind of picking random books off the shelf, covering topics that I was interested in. And one day I stumbled into the Anthropology section, and I pulled a book off the shelf that had a collection of scholarly papers written on the Sasquatch. Some of these papers, most of them, in fact, were written by cultural anthropologists, but several of them were written by physical anthropologists, most notably Grover Krantz. And so I started reading through that, and it really grabbed my interest, and then I spent the next week or two in the library, every chance I got, reading the thing that I could pull off the shelf. And it started occurring to me, like, not only are Bigfoots funny and quirky and weird and stuff that I've always loved, but they might be real biological creatures. So I started doing field work, and since then I've just become utterly engrossed into the topic, and I'm drowning in it on a daily basis.
Now, what is your background? You started getting into a lot of this in college too. Do you have a background in anthropology, or?
No, I don't actually. I've always been very, very interested in the physical sciences. For a while, I was a physics and astronomy major in college until I encountered Calculus 2, which kind of turned me off of that subject pretty quickly. I played around with marine biology because I used to work in fishing tackle stores and whatnot when I grew up in Southern California. I was fishing the islands and fishing tuna and stuff like that in Mexico and stuff. So I really enjoyed that. So I've always had a keen interest towards the physical sciences. I eventually landed in the music department, and I have a degree in jazz guitar, of all things. From there, awesome. I moved on, and even though I still do gigs, I played a jazz guitar duet around here in Portland, Oregon. We're called Mo Strings Attached. I play with another 7-string jazz guitarist, so it sounds like there's about 5 of us playing, and there's just 2. So I do that sort of thing, but my professional life, I've taught elementary school for about 13, 14 years.
Wow.
Until the TV gig came up, because I found early on, I mean, all modesty aside, I'm pretty smart and bright and funny and all that other stuff. So, again, all modesty aside, if I may toot my own horn a bit, but I found that I'm not really, really excellent at anything, but I'm pretty darn good at most things. And, that's kind of the job description of an elementary school teacher where you're teaching multiple subjects. So that's what I've been doing professionally until the Animal Planet gig came up.
Now, okay, I'm sorry. You go ahead and ask it, Loren.
I'm sorry. I have to, before we switch off the subject of it, teaching, you taught 4th grade?
I've taught 4th, 5th, and 6th grade.
Oh, my goodness. Now, what did your students think about your interests in Bigfoot? I mean, did you share that with them?
Oh, of course. It's hard to hide, honestly. I tried to hide it for 1 year. I wasn't very successful, though, mostly because my principal was a little wary about it. But, she eventually came around and, maybe eccentric, but I'm not a weirdo. So things kind of came around and everything was okay. But the long and short of it is my students love it. I mean, whether they believe in Bigfoot or not. And really, the classroom is a microcosm of the American public. Everybody pretty much loves Bigfoot or has some interest, whether they believe the creatures are real or not. And it also has something to do with the way I run my classroom, because I found out in my classroom a long time ago that if I treated myself like a god, the students would too. And so I come in with this sort of like mock arrogance where, you've probably seen the Stephen Colbert show, the Colbert Report.
Oh, yeah.
You know how he treats himself like a god? That's very much the same way that I've always treated myself in my own classroom. And the students, like, for a couple of days, they go along with it, and they start realizing that I'm just doing it as a joke because I think it's funny.
Right.
And then pretty soon they tag along. So any weird thing I bring to them, weird being Bigfoot or whatever else I might bring up, because I'm always doing something outrageous in the classroom because I'm competing with television. And in order to keep the students' attention, I need to do that stuff. So whatever sort of off-the-wall thing I bring to them, they know it's going to be under that character that I run in my classroom, where I am this god in my classroom, and they should all, do anything I say. And that's the whole thing. So I think generally speaking, if you surveyed the 300 or 400 students I've had, or however many I've had over the last X number of years, all of them will remember me, and I'd probably be their favorite amongst at least half of them. So they love the Bigfoot thing. They just love me.
Well, you're the cool teacher.
I know. Where were you when I was in school?
I don't know. I might have been in school. I don't know how old you are.
Yeah. No, we're betting for the same team. Let's just say that. I'll go no further. But that's great. Oh my gosh. I wish that there were more teachers like you. Really. Because I have two small children, and some of their teachers that they've gone through, they're dry or they're so old that they really need to retire.
I've always thought that if I'm not having a good time in the classroom, neither are my students. So I make darn sure that I'm having a great time in my classroom.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Now, Cliff, how you mentioned you've been teaching since you got the show gig. How did that happen? How did that come about for you?
The gig, the Animal Planet show?
Yes, with Finding Bigfoot.
Basically, our production company, Ping Pong Productions, which is a great company. They do Destination Truth and a few others. I think they have like 4 or 5 shows in the air, if I remember right. So they're a great company. They pitched the show, and they got picked up by Animal Planet, and then they started looking for, Bigfooters, basically. And I've been running a pretty popular blog, I guess, and I have a website and whatever else. That's kind of a cache for storing data and that sort of thing. So they found me, basically. They found me and called me like a couple years ago November, and they kind of courted me and asked me if I'd be interested. And, I was tentative because I was teaching and all that stuff. And so I sent them some clips. In the meantime, I had done some Monster Quests. I did Monster Quest once, and I did that Bob Saget gig. And so there was some stuff of me on television. They took that stuff and they floated it by focus groups and whatever, and they called me back, many, many months later and asked me if I'd be interested in doing it. So, and of course, when an opportunity like that comes along, it's pretty hard to say no.
Yeah.
Because life is short, and the good news is we're all going to die. So
and there's the good news.
There's great news. That means you can make mistakes, and it won't be long until those mistakes don't matter anymore.
Wow.
I love that attitude.
I mean?
That's very cool. That's cool. Take a chance.
Yeah, I mean, life is crazy, and mine seems to be particularly crazy, but life is crazy. So grab the bull by the horns, go for the ride, see what happens, because existence is beautiful. And so far, some of my biggest mistakes have given me the biggest blessings. And I mean, I'm not wise enough to know what's good for me, but so I'm just kind of going along for the ride.
See, we have several friends of the shows that have been on several different television programs over the last couple of years, and we hear everything from good experiences to not quite so good experiences, and it's a tough industry to be in, especially when you're worried about you shot all these shows now, are people going to watch them, or what are the ratings going to be like? Do you find that when you guys are doing the show that you have a lot of that pressure in the background, either from the production company or the network, to either not to beef things up, but to affect how you're doing your investigations?
Yes and no. I will say, when we're out on the road, as far as I'm concerned, and I think it's fair to say that no matter what I say on tonight's show, I can only speak for myself. So I can't speak for Bobo or Matt or Renee or anybody else. By and large, when we're out on the road doing stuff, the last thing on my mind is ratings, because I have to keep my integrity about me as a Bigfooter and just a person. I'm not going to go and, first of all, I'm not going to lie about anything on the air. If I say something on the air, that's because I'm believing it. I could be wrong, and I'm totally open to being wrong, and I think most people should open that possibility a little bit wider. There seems to be a very, heavy stigma in the Bigfoot community. Like, I can't be wrong, so I'm going to defend my position no matter what. Well, I'm very open to being wrong and exploring possibilities. So if I say it on the show, I believe it. I'm not going to lie about that. Now, there is a balancing act that was very difficult, particularly the first season, between Bigfooting as I know it and making television. And so, like when we're out, I remember the first season, a couple times we were out on the road and we did howls and coyotes called back. And like the producers, who are generally LA sort of people, they go, "What was that? What was it?" We're not excited. And we go, "It's coyotes, man." And he goes, "Yeah, well, it is? Oh, okay. Well, can't you get excited about that?" And we tried to explain, like, okay, we've been doing this for 20 years, man. If we got super excited every time we heard coyotes,
there goes your
conditions.
That, and there goes your credibility too, because people are going to know they're coyotes.
Well, yeah, but you know what? They explained things to me, and like, okay, Cliff, you know what? Most of the audience don't know it's coyotes. We're not going to see it's a Bigfoot, but we want to see your enthusiasm. One of the producers in particular was very helpful. And what she explained to me is that, okay, Cliff, you've been in the classroom forever. You know the vinegar and baking soda, volcano thing, where you mix them together and
Sure.
food coloring in it, and voila, you have a volcano. If you're doing that for sixth graders or fifth graders, you don't like do it and then let it go flat. You get excited about it every year you do it because your students depend on you.
Correct. Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, they basically reminded me, don't lose the magic, because what we're doing out there in the woods is fun, and it is kind of incredible, and it's a great thing, and not everybody gets to do this. I'm taking, basically the way I look at it, and I know this is a real long-winded, roundabout way to answer your question. My classroom went from 30 students to 1.6 million. And I'm trying to take every single person out there in TV land out in the woods with me, Bigfooting. And I view that as a heavy responsibility, and I'm going to get enthused about it. Like, I don't know if you saw the Rhode Island episode. It was a barred owl above me, and I loved it. And all I need to do is remind myself that I don't have to fake anything, but I can tap into that what's the word, like innocent, wide-eyed view of the woods at night and try to bring that to the people at home. I think that's a beautiful thing. That's really cool, and it's a really neat responsibility, and I don't know, it's just so... does that answer the question? I'm kind of just rambling now.
No, we're loving this. This is actually fascinating. It's really great.
Because like you were saying, you've been doing it for so long, and it's really hard not to get jaded. So, no, I understand what you're saying, that, it's an honest enthusiasm. And if you're not showing enthusiasm, you're not going to bring in the audience, and they're not going to feel the enthusiasm. So I totally understand what you're saying.
Right. And when I'm out there, I kind of view it as I'm taking the producers Bigfooting, and they don't know any better. So let's get them excited. Let's get them loving this. And that's my job in a way, because I'm a Bigfooter, but that's not my job. My job is to make a TV show. And even though those things are sometimes hard to mix, there's a really cool gray area middle ground that both can meet at. And I think that's where the magic happens. And when there's a really, really cool moment on Finding Bigfoot, that's when we've reached that place.
No. Fantastic. You're like the Anthony Robbins of the Bigfoot world. I love it. You're so positive and energetic and enthusiastic. I love it.
Well, like I said earlier, we're all going to die. How do I want to spend my life?
That's right. I mean? Good for you.
And see, when you die, you come to us because we're actually, if you may not know this, we're actually paranormal investigators. So we do ghost hunting as our end of it, and so we've had many of our own experiences, so we can relate. And we've actually been on a couple of our own shows that didn't quite have the best of experiences, but that's the nature of the beast sometimes. Now, I did have a question for you about the Bigfoot Field Research Organization. Did you ever work with the BFRO before Finding Bigfoot, or I know that they pushed that a lot for the show with Matt Moneymaker being the founder of the BFRO. I don't know, had you met Matt or Bobo or Renee, worked with any of them before the show?
I've been friends with Bobo since about, 2004, 2005, I think, somewhere in there. And I think I met Matt sometime in the same time span. I was a member of the BFRO for a long time. I don't think I'm currently a member, but it doesn't really matter to me because I'm an independent Bigfoot investigator and more than happy and willing to work with anybody. I'm really not much of a joiner or anything like that. I mean, even political parties, I don't care. It's kind of like the Groucho Marx thing. Anybody who would have any club that would have me as a member, I wouldn't want to join. So I kind of take that route with everything. But yeah, I've known Matt and Bobo for quite some time. I've done a lot of great places and spent a lot of time in the woods with Matt before. And heck, Bobo and I we pretty much are still best friends. I mean, we love each other. He's a great, great guy. And one year, I took a voluntary leave of absence from my work. It's actually, I was in between moving various places. So I was kind of homeless for a year on purpose. And I spent most of that year in the woods between the Southern Sierras of California and British Columbia. And I think that year, Bobo and I logged almost 200 nights in the woods together that year.
Wow.
So he and I are very close, and we're very, very good friends, and have been for some time.
You could see that chemistry on screen, too. I mean, Bobo, he seems like such a great guy, and when you two are interacting on the show, you could see that friendship definitely coming on into people's living rooms.
Yeah. Bobo's a huge joy of the show for me. And Renee, I'd never met Renee before the show, but she's been around in some circles. I just never ran across her.
Now, when working on the show, you guys spend a lot of hours together, and how's been that working relationship, working with the cast for these 2 seasons?
For me, it's been good and bad. It's been a little difficult at times, but part of that is not only my nature, which is, of course, being an introvert. I'm very introverted. I spend a lot of time alone. A lot of my bigfooting trips, like I take a week or 2 off during the summer when I was a teacher to go bigfooting alone and just travel around. I love being alone. I love the quiet of the woods, and traveling around with an entourage of 16 cast, crew, and producers can get a little taxing on me. And then, of course, when you get the cast members together, we're honestly a bunch of stubborn, pig-headed people. Because you kind of have to be if you're going to devote your life to chasing something that everybody else tells you doesn't exist. So we have a bunch of strong opinions and whatever else, and there's some clashing, but the same kind of clashing you would expect like in a family gathering at Thanksgiving or something like that. Anybody wears thin on you after a while, and when you're particularly stubborn and pig-headed like we all are, it can happen even more so. And sometimes that, I imagine, comes through the screen as well.
Well, where your personalities really do come out in the show, and that's one of the things that makes the show enjoyable, it's not just cut and dry, okay, people walking in the woods looking for Bigfoot. Your personalities are definitely forefront in the show, and that's what draws the audiences in. They, first rule of filmmaking, if you don't care about your characters, then your film's going to fail. And watching you guys interact, now, the one thing that I really got a kick out of is, watched the first season, loved it, and then when you started doing the repeating the season and entitling it The Further Evidence, where you all came in, it was like watching VH1 pop-up video with your comments coming up on screen talking about the episode while we're watching it. That was an absolute hoot. I had such a blast watching your guys' comments.
Yeah, I think that was great because that gave an opportunity for some character development, because you're absolutely correct in that the show really isn't about Bigfoots. It's about these 4 weirdos that go look for Bigfoots. And that's really the clincher there. In fact, at the Animal Planet offices, they have a poster of Finding Bigfoot. It says it's not about Bigfoot, it's about the people who look for them, And they're absolutely right. Yeah, I think that's a very, very well said, actually. I'll just end it there.
Oh, thanks. Now, having said that, with working on this show, in all the years that you've been looking for Bigfoot, have you ever found Bigfoot, or have you ever found? I know we've seen you find some evidence on the show, but have you ever actually seen the creature?
That's a great question. My answer is not a great answer. It's maybe. If I have seen a Bigfoot, it was actually on the North Carolina episode. of Finding Bigfoot Season 1, where we investigated Mike Green's footage. One of those nights, it was actually the very, very first night expedition we ever attempted with the production company. I don't know if you recall or not, but there were these witnesses that came forward and said that they went to a spot and they had Bigfoots around them in camp and they were throwing rocks at their tent all night.
Yes.
We actually went to that spot, which was not easy to get to. It was a 4.5-hour walk if you took the trail, or about 45 minutes or an hour if you went off trail. So about, a mile and a half, 2 miles in, off trail, which is the route we took with, an entourage of 2 camera guys, a sound person, a couple producers, a horde of witnesses, and whatever else. So we went out there that night, and it was 2 in the morning or so, if I remember correctly. And then we were in between scenes. They started my DVR backpack nonsense with that silly camera that looks me in the face. And I hear Matt going, "Who's on the hill?" Right? And I go, and we ignore him because it's Matt saying something, right? "Who's on the hill?" Right? And I don't know. No one's on the hill. "Cliff, are you on?" "No, I'm not on the hill, Matt." "Bobo, no." And "Who's on the hill?" And they go, dude, no one's on the hill, man. Relax. And he goes, "Someone's on the hill." And that's when people started looking at the thermal imager Matt was holding. And there was a bipedal figure standing about 75 yards from us up on the hill, alone, in the dark, watching us. And he goes, "Who are you?" like that. Then the thing starts walking. And Matt yells at it again, quite loudly. The thing stops in mid-stride, stands on one leg for 2 or 3 seconds, in mid-stride, with the arms out and the whole thing. And Matt goes, "It understands me," or whatever. "You hear me," or whatever he said at that point. And then I figured, what the heck is Matt yelling about, right? So I turn my thermal imager over there, and I see the bipedal figure walking from left to right in my viewfinder. It did not walk like Patty from the Patterson-Gimlin film, but it didn't walk like a human being either. It walked in this sort of like undulating. Its legs looked like it was riding a bicycle, but its arms looked like it was reaching out in front of it and pulling itself forward, almost like you would if you were in the shallow end of a pool and you're using your arms to propel yourself. That was the gait that I witnessed. And I looked at that thing, my jaw dropped, and I said, "Holy crap, that is a Bigfoot or a human being." And then Matt took off after it because he was positive that it was a human being. He thought it was some guy spying on us or something. I don't know what he was talking about, but he was positive it was a human being for some reason. Even though Renee, Bobo, and I all say that it was one color from head to toe in the thermal imager. Whatever it was, Matt chased after it with a thermal imager and night vision and a night vision binocular and never saw the thing again. I paralleled the bottom of the ridge line thinking that maybe it would go over the hill and I'd get another chance to see it. I never saw it again. Whatever it was almost 2 miles off trail, 2 in the morning, navigating a thickly wooded hillside without a light in the middle of Uwharrie National Forest, North Carolina. So was that a Bigfoot? I don't know. The circumstances kind of point to a Bigfoot, in my opinion. But Moneymaker will tell you the exact opposite. So I don't know. I have no idea if that was a Bigfoot or not.
See, actually, I'd be leaning towards Renee saying the exact opposite because she's convinced it's all a human being.
Now,
yeah.
Did you find any footprints or anything? Did you go to the site where it was standing?
Oh, yeah, I went up there and looked around. I did not find anything. It was generally a forest litter, which does not take footprints very well at all.
Right.
Footprints are amongst the rarest kinds of evidence. In my opinion, it's far easier to actually see a Bigfoot than find footprints.
Really? Gosh.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's tens of thousands of sighting reports on record, and there's less than 300 footprint casts in existence.
But then there was also the episode in the first season where you came across a couple of very pristine-looking prints.
Yeah, those were quite interesting. They were, at that time, the best footprints I'd seen in the ground. And, of course, I cast them, which is what everybody should do. I'm a little perplexed as to what left those prints. There were some things about it that really do point to Bigfoot for me. However, looking very closely at the anatomy that's visible in the prints, I'm kind of wondering could it be a bear or not. Dr. Jeff Meldrum and I, we work together sometimes, and I get some footprints. I send it his way because I deeply value his opinion. He's of the opinion that those are of a bear, and he very well might be right. But the point of the whole thing, the point of any footprint, is to cast it and find out what you have. The fact that these things, that those 2 footprints that I have, The heel is not rounded, which points to bear, and there's also there's a visible joint in the middle of the back of that foot that also points to bear. But at the same time, there were no other bear prints in that area, and there were no toe prints in the middle of it like there should have been for a double-stepping bear. So they are ambiguous, but if I had to put my money on it right now, I would say that they're more likely, like 60% chance, that they could be a bear print. But, just for the sake of full disclosure, on my website, cliffbarrackman.com, I have a footprint cast database, and those footprints are in there. And I put the dialogue, the email dialogue between Dr. Jeff Meldrum and I on the page that holds those footprints for everyone to see and everyone to read and come to their own conclusions. Because that's science. An important step in science is peer review. What do you think about it? Can you prove me right? Can you prove me wrong? What do you think? And it doesn't have to be a contentious argument. It could be, I don't think so, I do think so, this is what I think. Great. And so that evidence, that data is out there for everyone to look at and make up their own mind.
So, Cliff, let me ask you, because we have a thermal imager that we use, and I'm not sure if people understand that you can actually just use it as almost like a flashlight. You don't have to record. Now, were you guys recording when you were doing this, or no, because you were walking through the woods on a trail?
We generally are recording the entire time we're out there. That particular time when we saw that thing on the hill, Matt's recorder was not running, and he took off before anybody could turn it on. I think somebody caught up to him and managed to get it on while he was running through the woods or whatever. He's a very emotional guy, so he does what he thinks is right all the time, whether it is or not.
And yours?
My recorder was supposedly running, but for some reason it didn't start recording until the thing was a blip on the hill and it just went over. And I have no explanation for that.
It's because it's extraterrestrial.
There you go. That's right.
Well, you know what it is? I mean, everyone's heard of Murphy's Law. I strongly suspect that Murphy was a Sasquatch.
and here I thought Murphy was an optimist. Now, I heard a debate this week, actually, on a fellow radio show, and knowing you were coming on, I really wanted to ask what your opinion is, being now a professional Bigfoot hunter. What is your opinion on the idea that science is not going to accept this creature unless somebody kills one and brings in a body? Do you lean towards having that body brought in for science and killing one of these creatures, or what is your opinion on that?
My opinion is that Sasquatches should not be killed, and as far as I'm concerned, for any reason. I think that killing a type specimen, that's what they're called, a type specimen, killing a type specimen of a Sasquatch is just generally kind of a rude idea. And I also think it's outdated, frankly. I think that's a very 19th century sort of Darwinistic idea. When Darwin was sailing to the Galapagos and whatnot, hey, that's a beautiful bird. Let's kill it and find out what it is. Maybe that's suitable for earthworms or, small lizards or something like that. But I think that's totally and utterly inappropriate for any great ape. And mind you, when I say great ape, I mean the biological classification, and I include human beings in that. Human beings are primates. We do not have tails, and that makes us apes in the family of apes. A lot of people really get their hackles up about that, but it's a biological classification, and that's the way I use that. In fact, I don't think there's that big of a difference between us and the extant great apes as it is. They are intelligent, problem-solving, sentient, self-aware beings that have language capabilities. They just lack the anatomy to make the sounds.
So actually, that sounds a lot more intelligent than a lot of the people I know.
Well, yeah, that's the way I'm kind of tongue-in-cheek, at those town hall meetings, and I say that Bigfoots are smarter than some of our next-door neighbors. And that might actually be true. We don't know much about these things. And I think that, frankly, it would probably be a crime. Not at this point, because it's not really on the books unless you're in Skamania County, Washington. But I think it would be a moral crime to kill one and bring one in.
Oh yeah,
antique idea, in my opinion. I think that because here's the deal: Sasquatches are real, and because of that simple fact, that means that if you academic acceptance of the species is inevitable. It will happen. There's no rush on that, right? And some trucker's going to roll one down, or somebody important is going to see one in video or something. So since academic acceptance, or quote-unquote discovery, if you want to call it that, I don't call it that because, you know what, North America didn't need discovery. Tens of thousands of people knew it was here. Just like tens of thousands of people know Bigfoots are real. They don't need discovery either. So whenever academic acceptance comes, you only get one first impression. Do we want the first impression of the Sasquatch on the American public to be a bloody corpse on a slab?
Oh.
Or do we want it to be extended video of a female Sasquatch interacting with its young? What would be better for the species? Well, obviously the answer is the video. And video is not proof of anything. But in my opinion, academic acceptance or discovery is not going to happen in a flash. There's going to be a rising tide of acceptance. More and more people will turn their head that way and start looking at the data instead of ignoring the data as they have been. And all you have to do is delve into the data, and before long, you're pretty convinced Bigfoots are real. Because you know what? None of those scientists have ever seen an atom either, but they're pretty sure atoms are real too, based on the data. And that's where I suggest academics look.
Well,
But I find it so ridiculous because they're so rare. There may be only a handful, but let's kill one. I mean, what kind of logic is that? I mean, it's.
Well, so many times I hear.
I think, they might be in our own genus. I'm of the inclination to think that they are. We are Homo sapiens sapiens. That's our species name. Homo is the genus name. I strongly think that they're in our genus. I could be wrong. They could be something brand new for all I know. I don't know anything. But they show a lot of signs of being very, very human-like. And, the more human-like something is, the more of a crime it is to kill it. Let's not do that. I'm encouraging acceptance, this academic acceptance based on data for the first time and probably the most important time in all human history.
I totally, completely agree with you. I mean, if there's these creatures, whatever they are, I mean, there's obviously thousands of them across not only the United States, but there's evidence that they exist almost worldwide. And, if these animals obviously have a social structure, there's been observations of families. The one video that you investigated, I believe was it Tim Green that had the what looked like the young baby Sasquatch up in the tree in New York? No, that was another. That was another video.
New York baby video.
That was the other, not Tim Green, the other video. And I've heard many other stories of people who've seen these as family units. There's the famous case of, I think I got the name right. Now I just got the connection. I'm laughing. Bobo. There was back in the 1800s, some miners or somebody captured what seemed to be a young Bigfoot, and they had
Jacko.
Jacko, that was it. Jacko.
1888, outside of Yale, British Columbia.
Yes, and Jacko, they kept him for a while. They studied him for a while, but it's funny that there's these academics kept this animal, and now we basically have no record of it. And supposedly Jacko died. Was he sent over to Europe or something and disappeared?
Well, no one knows what happened to him. Apparently, he was held in a cage in Yale, British Columbia, for a short time. And then he disappeared. Academics did not, in fact, hold him. It was the townspeople, like the railroad guys, who got him. And no one really knows what happened to him afterwards. However, a couple of Bigfooters, Chris Murphy and Tom Steenberg, they've done some work on this. They located the original Yale town because it's now been moved a little bit away from where the mill was, where the old town was. They've done a lot of sleuthing in that general area, so they know actually more about that situation than I do.
It seems to have been a lot of interactions. Bigfoot stories go back with the with the white settlers or white people for a couple of hundred years, and of course the Native Americans have their tales that literally go back thousands of years. But we've talked to some other Bigfoot researchers on our show about some of these famous cases, like the Ape Canyon incident back in the 1920s. Those miners who fought off what seems like a bunch of angry Bigfoots at night after shooting one. Albert Ostman's experiences of being captured by a Bigfoot family and living with it for almost for a few days before he was able to escape. Whether these stories are true or not, I mean, there's enough of the stories that seem to be based in fact, that we've been dealing with these creatures for a long time. But here we are now in the 21st century. Mankind has, especially here in America, we've like exploded in our population, but yet there's still these isolated pockets out there in the continent and around the world where these things can still seem to exist and thrive.
I would actually say that almost the converse is true. It's these isolated pockets in which humans live. There is a tremendous amount of land that, frankly, isn't thickly inhabited at all. Even in California, and correct me if I'm wrong, but California, I believe, has the most people out of all the 50 states. But they're all located mostly along the coast in these urban centers. And outside of town, even in places like Monterey, California, Monterey and all that area that has a lot of people there, but you go outside of town, just a little bit south of there, and lo and behold, there's a military base, Hunter Liggett. There's Sasquatches on Hunter Liggett, right outside of town. San Francisco, you go north a bit in Sonoma County, and there's some places on the Sonoma County coast, even though there are households in there, Sasquatches. There are Sasquatches in all of the 49 states except for Hawaii, which makes sense. And it's only in these weird urban centers now. I believe I read it, I could be wrong, but I believe this past year before, I read an article that stated for the first time in all human history, over half the population was in urban centers.
Wow.
Now, that's a very, very small area. The people outside of urban centers, they live pretty far away from each other. Generally speaking, it's not very dense. And frankly, there's a lot of land. There's a lot of land. And, people say that, where would a Bigfoot hide? Well, that shows kind of like, that shows someone who's not familiar with being outside in the woods. There's a lot of land. Rhode Island is a great example. The Rhode Island episode was on this past Sunday. When I heard we were going to Rhode Island, I was thinking, why? Isn't it all like farmland and city? And it turns out I get there. Well, it was a lot of farmland, but all that farmland has been left and given back to the forest. Even though Rhode Island is the most densely populated state in all the 49 states, 59% of the land in Rhode Island is forested. That's a lot of land for these Bigfoots, especially if there aren't very many of them, to move around. And don't forget, they're most active at night, or at least they seem to be. And at night, nobody's out there. They have the run of wherever they want to go.
Now, they're in in every state, as you mentioned, the 49 states, and in any area where there seems to be forest, there is one time or another people have reported some type of Bigfoot activity. I live up in the very northwestern part of New Jersey, near the New York State border, and we have our own Bigfoot up here. They call him Big Red Eye. It doesn't make a lot of appearances, but it's seen every once in a while. They hear the screams coming in from the mountains at night. The town of Wantage, north of me, 10 years ago had incidents where something was coming in down from the mountains that wasn't a bear. Cops chased it a few times. And it's made the newspaper a few times, too. And other cases around the Wanacue Reservoir in Morris County, people have seen it out near the Delaware Water Gap. So a lot of places, even here locally, in such a densely populated state like New Jersey is, you still have activity here, too.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. And, Sasquatches just frankly don't need as much land as one would think, especially if they're just passing through an area. And that really was driven home to me when I went to eastern Ohio. I did a trip with Matt Moneymaker a few years back to eastern Ohio, following up on some excellent vocalizations that we recorded in Beaver Creek State Park. When I was there, I was struck by how much of that land was actually cleared for farmland. But the Bigfoots there, when they're not inside the state parks, which, are actually fairly large in acreage and have a lot of land for them to move around in, but they don't stay there because they don't know what's the state park or not. They just go wherever they want. They're like the ultimate anarchists, But so they're moving by the farmlands, in between the farms using these grain strips that are sometimes only a few yards across. That's their avenue of travel. They're very, very good at what they do. They're very good. They're like super ninjas. They can move about unseen during the day a lot of times. They kind of know what's up with us, so they avoid us because they know far more about us than we know about them. And they've learned our habits pretty well. They can avoid us very, very efficiently. They don't really need that much area to hide in, especially if they're not taking permanent residence there.
When you've been out doing your research, whether either with the show or on your personal time, yeah, it can get kind of creepy out there being in the woods in the middle of the night. Have you ever had any really strange experiences while you've been out Bigfoot hunting?
Well, I'm out Bigfoot hunting. I guess that's kind of a strange experience to begin with. There's been a few times I've got kind of creeped out or whatever, but one time in particular jumps to mind. I had one of my best encounters. Actually, Bobo was there. 2 years running, we ran into these small group of Bigfoots. I think they might have been juveniles by the way they're acting, at this place that I call the Water Spot, which is very close to Bluff Creek, where the Patterson-Gimlin film was taken. The Water Spot, when I first discovered it, the road was blocked off, so I walked in, and I found these really interesting tree breaks that were off trail. These particular tree breaks were found at a place along an animal trail, where the animal trail broke a 90-degree angle 4 times. And these tree breaks were located at the place where the animal trail changed directions. And in each case, the tree break was pointed in the direction of travel if you were traveling from this particular marsh to another particular marsh. And at the end of the animal trail, I found a 14.5-inch footprint. It was actually very compelling. And then when I found that, I was really excited. Like, oh man, this place has got it going on. They were here not too long ago. I'm going to spend the night here, and I was alone. But I'm going to spend the night here, spend the next couple of days here looking around. I started going to my car, and about halfway back to my car, I was going to set up camp. I got really, really spooked, and I can't explain why. Maybe it's the infrasound thing. Maybe it's, I don't know what it was. Maybe it's just myself, some sort of feedback loop in my head. But I got really spooked, and I just couldn't stay there that night. I don't really have a good explanation for it, but that's the truth. And funny enough, I was about 3 miles away, 2 miles away, really, and spent the night there alone. And I had 3 or 4 bears around me that night. So I don't know what really was going on at the Water Spot. Although the next year it turned out to be one of the best Bigfoot spots I've ever run across. So maybe that's what was going on.
Now, you actually led into what I was going to ask you about with that, because what is your opinion on the theory of the whole infrasound, that these animals are able to produce this, inaudible sound that affects you physiologically? I mean, it hits something, with our perceptions that causes that nervousness to make you want to leave.
I think it's a very interesting possibility. If not likelihood. They're certainly large enough to create very, very loud sounds, whether audible or not. And it seems, based on the experiences reported by witnesses and comparing those to the results of infrasonic frequency studies, it seems very, very likely that that's what's going on with Sasquatches. When you take a survey of mammals in general, or actually animals in general, that use infrasound for various purposes, you start finding that a lot of the things that they use those for would be useful to Sasquatches. Elephants, for example. Elephants can communicate with each other for 5 or 10 miles away using infrasonic frequencies, and they actually feel those frequencies in the ground with their big feet. I'm not suggesting that Sasquatches do that, but an interesting component to infrasound is that infrasound is not absorbed by trees. Whereas, throughout their screaming or yelling, the trees suck up all your noise. And they just absorb the sound, and they prohibit your sound from being broadcast a long distance. However, infrasonic frequencies, the sound waves, are so long and so large that the trees have no effect on them. So, and in fact, they travel through the ground. So in theory, like say Sasquatches do use infrasound, a Sasquatch on one side of a mountain can probably communicate with the Sasquatch on the other side of the mountain, because the infrasonic frequencies would actually travel straight through the ground. And when you look at the naval experiments, like I don't know what decade it was, but the Navy was doing experiments on infrasound, seeing if it would be a viable use of infrasound would be a non-lethal crowd control. And so they were blasting these poor subjects with like huge doses of infrasound and crazy volumes that they couldn't hear, just to see what would happen to them. And you get things like nausea, the feeling of being watched, being scared unexplicably, dizziness, just the whole range of stuff. And a lot of those particular symptoms, I guess, have been reported by witnesses of Sasquatches, sometimes before the witness even saw the Sasquatch. So I think there's a very strong correlation, and thus a very strong possibility that Sasquatches do in fact use infrasound.
Your symptoms that you described, and Karrie-Ann, I don't know if you picked up on this, and Loren too, with what we do in our research as paranormal ghost investigators, is we measure electromagnetic fields, and high electromagnetic fields and high EMF is said to cause almost all the same symptoms that you just described. And people who go into a location and they feel like they're being watched, they feel uncomfortable, tense, like the eyes are on the back of them. They get that scared feeling for no reason, and they want to leave. And when we do measurements at the time, we actually find elevated levels of EMF in the area, which makes me, I don't know, maybe it's related, maybe not. I would almost like to see the next time you guys, when you're out investigating, if you have some type of EMF meter with you, that if anybody starts experiencing the what seems to be infrasound, to start taking EMF readings. I mean, maybe it'll be a correlation, maybe not, but I find it very similar enough to be very fascinated by it.
Yeah, especially in the middle of the woods.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, especially if you're in the middle of the woods and there's really nothing that's going to set it off, you know?
Well, yeah, and unfortunately there's a lot of naturally occurring infrasound out there, too. Everything from volcanism to waves to wind actually produces infrasonic frequencies. So the few attempts there have been at actually recording infrasonic sounds out in the woods have usually come up with nothing because of that. But interestingly enough, I mean, I don't have the equipment, despite the fact that I'm on TV, I don't really have a lot of money. But I would love to participate in a survey of infrasonic frequencies in North America, because it's never been done before. Zoologists who specialize in mammals and whatnot of North America have never done that. I would love to do that. But, in my research on infrasounds, I read about this haunting that I think it was in New England. And, people were seeing apparitions, and they were just kind of seeing fuzzy things. And I'm not really a ghost guy, by the way, but they were just seeing like lights and stuff, and they didn't know what was up. And then somebody came in and they found that there were infrasonic frequencies happening at the 19 hertz range due to the plumbing in the house. And they fixed the plumbing and the haunting went away. So as it turns out, a lot of those symptoms that people describe from infrasound might be confused with a haunting, because one of the other very subtle effects of infrasonic frequencies can be visual hallucinations.
What type of equipment do you use to test for infra?
That's what I was going to ask, because I need to get one.
Let's see. For infrasonic frequencies, you need very specially designed microphones, because obviously microphones are made for recording sounds for people, but you can't hear infrasound. So very, very few people, I should say, make microphones that are sensitive enough to pick up frequencies below the 20 hertz range. 20 hertz is 20 vibrations per second. 20 hertz is generally the sound wave that humans can hear at the very lowest end of good hearing. But there's a company called Earthworks. They make microphones, and that's what they use for elephant studies. They can record sounds down to about 2 hertz, which is phenomenally low. Now, then you also run into problems about the recording device itself, because, again, recording devices aren't really designed to record things that people cannot hear. But there are some specialty devices out there, and there's some great websites on people who study elephants and their use of infrasound, and they have suggestions for that particular kind of device. And, of course, listening to it can also be a problem because you can't hear it. And their solution to that is either get some extensive software to analyze it, or you can speed it up 5 or 10 times, and then thus like if you have a 10 hertz sound wave, if you speed it up 3 times fast, then it's a 30 hertz sound wave and you can hear it.
Now, what I would be interested in is some type of meter that we could be able to measure the infrasound without actually having to hear it. So, hey, maybe we need to contact Bill Chappell or somebody to get on to building that.
Giuliano.
Just to see that it's present, not necessarily have to hear what it's saying. Like, I think I missed it, or you didn't say, what did they use that they figured it out that it was the plumbing? What was the device?
I don't remember. I honestly don't remember. I was doing this research about 2 or 3 years ago, and that's just one of the tidbits that's stuck in my brain. As I said earlier before we went on air, I only have a limited amount of RAM.
Okay, but you need to tap into something for us in the paranormal, which is pretty
Yeah, God knows I need an upgrade.
John Keegan probably has something that does this.
One of our investigators who's a mechanical engineer. He's really big into sound. So we're going to have to talk to him about this.
Didn't he bring something on the USS Salem? Remember the microphones that he had?
He brings stuff all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, that was,
he's the techie. We need to have him explain it and talk to him. Cliff, we're coming up towards the end of the program, and I wanted to ask you, what's coming up next for Finding Bigfoot? What's the next week's show going to be about? Actually, it's going to be airing tonight, Sunday, at 10 p.m. tonight after our show, so everybody be sure to tune in. But where are you guys going this week?
I'm a little confused on that. It's because the Animal Planet website currently has the next episode to be the one we did with Todd Standing in outside of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. However, promos on last week's episode say that the next episode is Minnesota. So I don't really know what's going to be on. But I will say that the Minnesota episode is a lot of fun. We got to drive, I got to drive around this crazy amphibious swamp vehicle through these crazy, beautiful, tremendous, vast swamps in northern Minnesota, and went to these islands and looked for predator sign. It was really exciting and a lot of fun with fantastic witnesses. And if perchance it is the Calgary, Alberta episode, and if it's not on tonight, it'll be on next week. That's a fantastic episode as well. The scenery there was breathtaking. That is a huge, huge place. It was very difficult in this particular case to narrow down where the Sasquatches would be, because it's on the dry side, the east side of the mountains, and of course, Sasquatch sightings are strongly correlated with the amount of rainfall in a given area. So the dry side of the mountain would have less Sasquatch sightings than the wet side over British Columbia. And that was totally true. But we spoke to the Native American tribes there. They gave us advice. They gave us a blessing in order to see a Bigfoot if possible. It is going to be an epic, beautiful, fantastic episode. I would highly encourage everyone to check it out, mostly because it's a lot of fun. But definitely, if for no other reasons, just to see the various habitat that Sasquatches can actually inhabit.
Awesome. And I also wanted to mention for our listeners that a very good friend of our program who's been on the show, Tim Stover Jr., also known as TCSJR Bigfoot, he was going to join us tonight. Unfortunately, something came up and he wasn't able to join us to talk to Cliff, but he will be appearing in an upcoming episode of Finding Bigfoot that you all filmed in Ohio. So we're really looking forward to seeing that, because we've talked to Tim about his experiences before in the past. He has some incredible information. He's done a lot of fantastic research that he shares with people through his YouTube channel. And go ahead, Cliff.
We looked into his 1993 sighting, and by doing a recreation, even he learned something about his sighting that he didn't know before. It's pretty exciting. It's great.
Well,
cool.
He's been posting ever since actually he shot with you guys. He's had several incredible experiences out in the woods, capturing more evidence. He found a pristine footprint that he was able to cast. He caught the strange eye shine one night, and the odd thing about this video is there were two creatures standing about 8 feet tall watching him from the woods. And he had his thermal camera, and when he pointed the thermal in the woods, no heat signature whatsoever. But yet the camera, you could see the eyes blink and move as the heads turned, and then he went back the next day, and he, in broad daylight, to reshoot the area. There is absolutely nothing reflective there, no houses with lights, no cars. It was a really odd, strange experience. Now, I'm not going to say it's paranormal or 100% it was Bigfoot, but he's been capturing a lot of very fascinating things, and I really encourage people to visit his channel on YouTube at TCSJR Bigfoot. And Cliff, it has been fantastic having you on the show tonight. I really enjoyed talking to you. I feel we could easily go another hour. You're a lot of fun to talk to. I wish I was a kid taking your elementary school class.
Me too.
Well, thank you
so much for having me. I do appreciate it.
Well, thanks again. And thank you, everybody, again, for tuning in to another episode here of Unknown Origins Radio, where you can hear us every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on the Decadence Radio Network. And we sign off with our motivational quote of the week. You can't always control who walks into your life, but you can control which window you throw them out of. Have a great night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Night.